that plant for probably 25 years or something like that, and kept perfect records on it all. All that equipment that was used in the process. As a chemical engineer, it's the chemical engineer that designs and builds the place and makes it work. And you take corn in one end and you in boxcars, and you send the boxcars out the other end in starch and sugar and feed most of the time in those days. A lot of different things now, and a lot bigger place now. But, and it's now, by the way, it's ADM, Archer Daniel Midland. But no, and it's so much larger now.
Do you know if your dad knew anybody who was involved in the union, or did he mostly interact with other people in management?
Oh, my father probably knew almost everybody. Oh, sure. When they're a kid, right out of chemical engineering school, and he had a little bit of, he worked for the government. It was just before, but the war was on, but we weren't in it yet. In 1939, he graduated in 38 from Iowa State University in 1938 with a degree in chemical engineering, and he worked for the TVA. That's the Tennessee Valley Authority, and he was making phosphorus. You've seen movies and videos of the war where you see machine guns and guns shooting into the mostly anti-aircraft, but some other guns that would be machine guns, and you see tracer bullets where you can follow where the bullet's going. They burn, and that's phosphorus. Phosphorus will burn at ambient air temperatures, and it's made underwater. And he was hired then, and he was a civilian employee of the government making phosphorus. The TVA had a lot of hydroelectric power down in the southeast, and the Tennessee River and others. And they made phosphorus underwater, and of course something went wrong with the slurry, and the water all started to boil and the whole place blew up. And my father was burnt terribly, and his whole back and legs and buttocks and awful, and was in the hospital, and he never went back to the factory. He got a different job and came to Clinton, Iowa at Clinton Corn Processing Company as their engineer. Then his first job was, he was superintendent of the milling division. So he ran the whole milling division at the Clinton Corn. That's where the corn comes in, and it goes into the steeps where it gets wet, and they put a little sulfur in it, and the corn kernels sit there a couple of days, and they swell, and then they're milled to break it all out, and they separate it all.
What role did your father play during the strike? What role did your father play during the strike?
He was for the most part, he was still a chemical engineer, but he did go into the factory and kept it. He and almost everybody, I don't know who didn't, in the management, went into the factory and kept it going, barely. Kept it going. I can't say it was extraordinary, but they kept it going. They tried to keep it going. I suspect production was poor, but they kept it going, and nothing blew up. So.
Were you in Clinton in the 1970s?
Oh, was I?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Yeah.
See, I went on I practiced law in Clinton. Of course, I was in the legislature from 67 to 72, and then I quit the legislature. I got married and started raising a family, and couldn't make a living at $40 a day in the legislature, and I wasn't going anywhere in my party, and so I quit the legislature. I just didn't run again, and I came back here, and I had a private law practice, and then the governor called me, and I was chair of what was called an OSHA review commission for a while, and then I went on. Then the governor appointed me to be a district judge in '74, and I served as a district judge from '74 to 2012. 38 years. I got on my pony, and I rode a circuit in 5 counties most of the time in eastern Iowa. Once in a while I'd go out somewhere else, but most of the time I rode that circuit and served 5 counties. All the major cases in eastern Iowa for 38 years. Criminal, civil, general jurisdiction, everything.
Well, what's your impression of the community in Clinton during the strikes in the 1970s? How did they affect people in Clinton, including yourself?
The strike was heartbreaking, just awful. All these people knew each other. They were all friends. They knew their families. It just tore the community apart. I was on the court at the time, and the court was involved. I essentially moved to Davenport. I traded jobs with one of my colleagues in Scott County, Hobie Derbyshire, and he served. We rotated in among the 5 counties, but the principal litigation area for the district was in Scott County. We covered Jackson, Clinton, Scott, Muscatine, Cedar most of the time. Once in a while we'd go to Lynn or to Iowa City or to maybe to Dubuque or something, but most of the time in there, and principally in Davenport half the time. And so Hobie was from on the court and from Davenport, and I had a conflict because I knew everybody practically on both sides of it. And I had a conflict all over the place. So I went to Davenport, and I covered for Hobie, and that's J. Hobart Derbyshire. And he came to Clinton and took my place here during the strike. So I really didn't have anything to do with it. I couldn't. It was a clear conflict of interest, and we don't do anything like that.
What all went into the courts during the strike?
Oh my goodness, there's always somebody wants an injunction against something. Typically, management wants an injunction against the strikers picketing and so on, because not only do they stop their own people from coming in, but they stop in all the vendors and the suppliers and anybody else that wants to come into work. And there's some potential violence, and there's all kinds of labor laws on the whole thing. And so everybody comes running to court all the time. I couldn't have anything to do with any of it. And so I didn't move to Quad Cities, but I commuted down there every day and didn't have anything to do with the strike, either side of it. But the courts, I can assure you, had plenty of applications for different things, because there was always potential violence. You know, you always have some people that get too wild on both sides, and you know, you just have that in our society. Most people were pretty civil, but it was a terribly stressful time for a lot of people. And these people, 1,500 people, were out of their jobs, and that's you know, they can't eat. It's terrible. You got to raise a family, and there's both sides made. I think the strike. I think it was almost the contract was almost settled, or was settled, and then there was talk that somebody reneged on the whole thing, and so they went in on strike, and that terrible thing happened, I stayed away from it. I did other cases completely. So I really don't know as much about it as you might think I do.
What do you think about the media coverage during the strike?
I don't know, how did I do that?
You
What I
know-
think of the media coverage?
Yes.
Boy, I don't know. I guess I read the newspaper, but that's probably where I got all. That's where I got all my information is from. You see, I didn't live at home. I had my own family and kids, and I was. I didn't live with my folks, so I didn't have much. I see my folks maybe weekly, or talk to them at least weekly, but I didn't keep up on it other than the newspaper. And that's where I got most of my information. And so you'd go right back to those newspaper stories and find out. I don't know if they were accurate or not. I knew people on both sides and heard all the chatter about it on both sides. There was some violence. I was familiar with some violence, a lot of threats, a lot of beating on cars. The management, when they're going in, some people would hit the car with something. People were scared on both sides. Terrible time for this community. The biggest employer, out of work, no money, terrible. All friends, used to be. Broke up families. You had families in management and labor. You had, it was terrible.
Could you talk about some of the differences in the community in Clinton before and after the strike?
Some of the what?
Differences in the community, how the community changed?
Well, I think that changed the community forever.
What do you mean forever? Like, relationship-wise, people not getting along together. Can you specify more?
The line split down management and labor. And before the strike, everybody in the community liked each other. Yeah, I say everybody, for the most part. There was no significant difference between management and labor. They all treated each other approximately equally. I mean, from my experience, now more management belonged to the country club. We didn't, but more management was there and more labor were in other places, but we were all friendly. We hunted together. We drank a beer together. I worked with all those guys in the factory, and my dad knew all of them. And so did the other people. I mean, they saw each other almost. All the time. And Dad is an engineer. He's always out in the plant. He had his hard hat on. Get out in the plant all the time. And he knew everybody by their first name. So it was just terribly heartbreaking. And then after that, there were some very hard feelings. Hard feelings, and you didn't have the cooperation in the community since. And frankly, the city's never been the same. The city prior to that time was booming, growing. I suppose we had at least 30,000 people, and we might have had 32,000. I don't think we could get 28,000 here in a good day now in Clinton. The community just hasn't done well. We didn't attract very much new business after that. We became more of a blue-collar town. A lot of the management in most of the businesses left town. We lost all of our white-collar jobs in the community. Clinton Corn, of course, took them all, or now the Standard Brands, and then ADM took all of the white-collar jobs to the big cities. So did DuPont, so did the paper factories. all the more wealthy people in the community left Clinton too. They went to Florida. We had a monies and credits tax in Iowa at about the same time, where people with investments in stocks and bonds were taxed on those just like you were taxed on real property, like real estate. You were also, the monies and credits taxed like on personal property. And many of the wealthy people in the community left the community and went to Florida or Illinois, other places to avoid that tax. And then all this, to a large extent, happened at strike time or a little after. And the city has never been the same. Gosh, it was a dynamic place and growing when I was in high school. And that's why I came back. And it's never done as well. I'm sorry to say. What a shame. It was probably it was the watershed. It was probably the principal thing that happened to the community not doing quite as well. I mean, we were building schools and building libraries and building all kinds of things, and we had pretty ambitious people in the community bringing in new industry, new jobs. Things were booming. People were making money. Things were good. And after the strike, there was a little bit of that, but it slowed down. And it's never been the same. That answer your question? Sort of?
Sir, can you talk a little bit about your work with the community in the time that you've been here, different things that you've been involved with, projects that you've worked on?
Sure. I told you that I served in the legislature and did a number of things for the community, but mostly for the state. And I should mention to you, because it's so important today when we're going to go to a caucus a week from today in both parties in Iowa, and you've seen all the politics going on. When I served in the legislature in the late 60s and early 70s, don't forget this is 49 years ago, almost 50 years ago, 49 years ago now, I went to the legislature. We all liked each other. We all got along. I had more friends in the Democrat Party than I had in the Republican Party. I was a city Republican, and most of the Republicans were rural. And we got along. We did what was best for the community, and I handled many bills that were good for the state. And to this day, we're still those handful that are still left. And when I was there, most people there were a generation or 2 generations older than I was. But I've given you my short bio here. The long one is to go to peltonmediation.com and you can get the long form if you're interested in it. But then I served in the court from 74, like I told you, to 2012. And we couldn't even be involved in politics. We couldn't go to a caucus. We couldn't. I would sneak in and sit in the back row or with the press with a pad of paper if somebody as significant was in the community that I wanted to see and hear. But I didn't participate in any party or anything for 38 years. We're in the court system. We're precluded from doing that because political cases come to us, and we can't have signed a petition. We can't sign anything